There is no longer any need for Mel Brooks to hold back, as he has proven himself. The renowned filmmaker, who is famous for transforming mayhem into hilarious comedies, has revealed a shocking list: the 6 actors he hated collaborating with. Yes, he does mean loathed, in the most Mel Brooks-esque sense imaginable, a mix of ridicule and truth encased in decades of chaos in the entertainment industry. This list is Mel's brutally honest tribute to the most memorable and challenging partners in his life, ranging from celebrities who made him laugh too much to those whose perfectionist streak almost broke him. It may alter your perception of some of Hollywood's most recognizable stars while being hilarious and flamboyant. 1. Dom DeLuise. Mel Brooks collaborated with numerous amazing artists. People. However, complications arose over Dom DeLuise. I don't think it was because Dom wasn't polite. It wasn't due to his laziness. Mel's issue was considerably less complex. Dom chortled a great deal. Sounds like it could be harmless. However, this caused an enormous issue when filming. Dom couldn't help but laugh whenever somebody made a goofy expression or uttered a joke. Stood up. It was too much for him to bear. He had a tendency to burst into laughter even during crucial times. On occasion, prior to the beginning of the scene, directing Dom, according to Mel, was like babysitting. It was necessary to repeat each sentence 5 times. On occasion 10. When Mel would shout, "Action!" Dom would have already started laughing. On multiple films, they collaborated. Silent Movie, Spaceballs, History of the World Part 1, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights were all films in which Dom appeared. The plot was consistent throughout all of the films. The take would be ruined if Dom started giggling. It drove him insane, according to Mel. His chair would topple over. Put a mask on him. Mel used to say that when he heard the greatest joke ever, he would gasp for air. The part that's humorous, though? Not even his own jokes had him laughing. He was responding to other people. When paired with Harvey Korman or Madeline Kahn, he was over. Dom would snap at the sight of it. History of the World featured a sequence when Dom had just one phrase. First one. Madeline arched an eyebrow, though, and Dom crumbled. For half an hour, he chuckled. They had to hold off until he composed himself. When filming scenes with Dom, Mel began to experiment with new techniques. As much as he could, he avoided being photographed, in order to prevent Dom from confront other players. Attempts to halt his laughter will do. Nothing ever came out of it. "I couldn't fire him," Mel told a reporter. Reason being, it became comedic gold the moment we got a clean take. That was the issue with Dom. He was both clever and incredibly annoying. He had impeccable timing. Every scenario was enriched by his vibrancy. After he choked down his laughter, he delivered his lines with impeccable timing. Dom and Mel's friendship stood strong through the mayhem. When not filmed, they were rather near. Since Dom was a huge foodie, he frequently brought spaghetti to film. He took care of the crew's hunger and made jokes about them, as if they were family. Mel, on the other hand, never ceased making lighthearted complaints. The stories he told about Dom's impossibility were his favorites. Somewhat more often than that, I said, "Cut." When it came to Dom than any other actor, he stated, he was the one to blame half the time. It was love that brought Mel to work with Dom, even though he hated doing so. Dom was an annoyance on set but a delight off set. His infectious laugh brightened whatever room he entered, perhaps going overboard. That type of dedication, though, Mel knew he couldn't discover anywhere else. Quite the polar opposites, really. Mel desired command. Dom caused mayhem. It was successful, though. Everything slowed down as Dom laughed. He delayed the crew's departure. He was trying Mel's tolerance. On the other hand, he improved the flicks. The fact was not lost on Mel. No one was surprised. The scene-destroying director made the movies, even though he ruined scenes, according to Mel. At 98 years old, Mel Brooks has lost all self-control. When asked about his career, he is honest. Dom was the first person who came to mind when asked about his least favorite coworker. When Mel said it, a smile spread across her face. In reality, it was never hatred. It was the exact opposite of the love you have for your best friend when they're not being nice to you. A lot of love is in it. Dom DeLuise clogged up every set. It was all his fault. Everyone had to wait for him. But he was also a comedian. Via display. Away from the screen. Without fail. Mel despised that. He was smitten by that. That is the reason Dom is included in the list. 2. Madeline Kahn. Mel Brooks has long regarded Madeline Kahn as among the most gifted individuals he has ever had the pleasure of collaborating with. She possessed a rare combination of wit, intelligence, and timing that few possessed. Although she did produce him go completely insane. On several of his most accomplished films, they collaborated. Notable films in which she appeared include High Anxiety, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and History of the World Part 1. Her performances in each of these films were spectacular. It wasn't always easy, though, behind the scenes. Madeline had a reputation for being extremely picky. Every detail was important to her. She went above and beyond by doing more than simply reading the script. Things were dissected by her. Edits were made by her. She doubted nearly all of her assumptions. She requested a rewriting whenever she felt an uncomfortable line. She would point out if a costume was inappropriate. Everyone else was supposed to live up to her lofty expectations. She was chronically late to set, according to Mel. The team would be prepared. All of the cameras would be ready to go. They would patiently wait. She appeared composed, smiling, and unconcerned when she eventually entered. This really irritated Mel. You couldn't help but lose your temper once the camera started rolling. She never failed to deliver. She portrayed the weary singer Lily Von Shtupp, who possessed a dramatic flair, in the Western film Blazing Saddles. That part is now considered classic. Even still, her lines are often quoted. Mel, nevertheless, claimed that it was a real drag to film such scenes. Changing the scene's mechanics was something she wanted to do all the time. She would experiment with different vocal delivery, alter her lines, and occasionally even provide suggestions to the other performers. Attempting to stay up with her was something Mel frequently felt like he was doing. In the past, he admitted to wanting her to deliver a phrase exactly as they had practiced it. She responded by saying she had discovered an improved method. Mel conceded that she was frequently correct, but it didn't make things any easier. Even in Young Frankenstein, this occurred. Elizabeth, the main character's theatrical and pampered fiancée, was played by Madeline. The part was tailor-made for her. However, it was nothing short of a challenge. She requested additional takes. She wanted to see things from several perspectives. Lighting was even something she argued about. Mel claimed that she made each scene twice as challenging to film, but ultimately twice as rewarding. The rest of the crew took note as well. Madeline was intense yet intelligent, they muttered. Mel made the remark that guiding her was like attempting to wrangle a wet cat. His casting of her continued, though. The message was clear. Mel could have cast any number of women, but Madeline was the one he returned to time and time again. He sensed that she had something unique to offer. Her timing, facial expressions, and voice all contributed in a way that no one else could. Their bond was peculiar. Their mutual regard was tempered by their frequent disagreements. It was peaceful on some days. Disputes arose on other days. Madeline desired authority. Time was of the essence for Mel. Their goal was the same, to achieve the greatest possible outcome. Apparently Mel was so unhappy with the couch her character had to sit on that she had him rework a whole scene. He initially believed she was being stubborn. He initially disagreed, but eventually came around. On film, the new couch appeared more attractive. Even though it was annoying, he acknowledged that it demonstrated her attention to detail. He went on to say that she could make her persona shine through in any situation. She aimed for her scenes to be visually striking. Let her voice be heard, she wished. On set, that might lead to friction at times. Yet in the end, the sequence was improved by her selections, which helped the cut come together. Madeline was a very outgoing person. She refused to give an inch. She was determined and fiercely pursued her goals. Because of that, she was uncooperative. On the other hand, it amplified her notoriety. Mel, who is 98 years old, does not mince words. Among the 6 actors he detested collaborating with, he named Madeline. However, he clarified that the animosity stemmed from exasperation rather than animosity itself. He claimed she was very forceful, and that she double-ended his job duties. Not easy, but it yielded results that no one else had. The mayhem was fresh in his mind. A time of waiting. The never-ending arguments. On the other hand, he recalled the hilarious moments, the great takes, and the situations that persevere despite the passage of time. It was not easy being Madeline Kahn. She was argumentative, persistent, and chronically tardy. To be sure, she was top-notch as well. For that reason, she compiled the list. It wasn't because Mel strongly despised her. However, her unique brand of challenging made things better overall. 3. Mel Brooks' one collaboration with Gene Hackman was brief. For Young Frankenstein, that was it. And although it was only a brief role, it made a big splash. Although he was born into a different world, Gene was a fantastic performer. Mel stated that the two of them simply did not get along. In a hilarious sequence, Hackman portrayed the role of the blind hermit. Despite its brevity, the scene went on to become a cultural phenomenon. Awkward friendliness, slapstick, and timing were all there. People couldn't stop laughing about the scene. Filming it, though, wasn't quite as enjoyable as Mel claims. The somber parts that Hackman played made him famous. He was already an Oscar winner. He possessed an intense and dramatic style. He did a great deal of packing. Every instruction was carefully considered by him. He also assumed that everyone else would approach the task with the same level of seriousness. That was completely at odds with Mel's typical approach. Quickness was Mel's strength. He enjoyed unexpected comedic turns and carefree situations. He urged performers to attempt fresh information immediately. He preferred vitality over flawlessness. Yet, Hackman was not pleased by that. He desired an organized strategy. He insisted that from dress rehearsal to filming, the scene remain unchanged. On set, Mel recalled, Hackman had an extremely aggressive demeanor. He was polite. That man knew his stuff. However, he found the mayhem to be unpleasant. In the intermissions between takes, Mel and the rest of the crew joked around, and Hackman held my attention. He rarely cracked jokes. No matter how ridiculous his part was, he played it seriously. On set, a few minor arguments occurred. On occasion, Hackman would request additional practice sessions. Mel thought that was a hindrance. While Mel thought a little sloppiness enhanced the comedy, Hackman was equally concerned about getting every shot perfectly. Despite their differences, they were both committed to making the scene work. Mel expressed his admiration for Hackman's work. He described him as sharp and brilliant. On the other hand, he compared working with him to attempting jazz with a textbook reader. Their beats were completely dissimilar. In spite of all the stress, the scenario came out well. Hackman was very amusing. Everything came together: the character's subtle benevolence, the physical comedy, and the timing. People really enjoyed it. Despite the difficulty of the process, Mel acknowledged that the end product was worth it. They did not collaborate again following Young Frankenstein. According to Mel, it was completely illogical, so that Hackman might return to his untamed realm. Although Hackman enjoyed playing the role, he was miscast in Mel's loose setups. He relished command. Mel enjoyed independence. That much was clear to them both. In Mel's memory, Hackman had agreed to act in the film as an unofficial favor. After longing for a role in comedy, he approached Gene Wilder to inquire about possible casting opportunities. Incorporating him made Mel happy. According to him, he was taken aback by Hackman's initial inquiry. He had doubts that Hackman would be interested in appearing in a corny black and white comedy. However, he agreed. However, that gravity was apparent while filming. The rest of the cast cracked jokes, but Hackman remained true to his character, according to Mel. He despised frittering away time. When other performers started laughing during take back, he became quite irritated. As Mel related the story of Hackman looking at him each time someone destroyed a take, he couldn't help but laugh. The expression on their faces told it all. Why are we even trying if we can't keep it professional? It was not fury. It was merely a shift in perspective. Hackman was a drama major. Mel used to be a comedian. They were both effective. However, they aren't necessarily inseparable. Something, he added, had been taught to him by the event. Not every brilliant actor has a typical profile. Comedy is where some people truly excel. Being precise is necessary for some. And then, there are some, like Hackman, whose intensity transforms the room. Many viewers of Young Frankenstein still find that scene to be magical. It demonstrates that their distinct approaches could potentially collide, although briefly. Great tension can occasionally give rise to hilarious situations, as this illustrates. 4. Mel Brooks held Cloris Leachman in the highest regard. He frequently praised her as one of the best actors he had ever collaborated with. On screen, she exuded intelligence, competence, and bravery. However, behind the scenes, she was the main source of his headaches. High Anxiety, Young Frankenstein, and History of the World, Part 1 were all projects in which they collaborated. At the same time, she lent a strong presence to the part. Still, she carried disputes with her. Numerous them. Cloris was mentally formidable. It wasn't like she blindly followed orders. As Mel handed her the notes, she did more than simply grin and nod. Why, she wanted to know. He was challenged by her. Various options were proposed by her. On occasion, she would just disobey his orders and proceed according to her own will. Mel went completely bonkers over that. He compared directing Cloris to attempting to control an untamed horse. She was active and focused, but she resented being micromanaged. No matter what other people said, she would remain steadfast in her belief that her way was better. She portrayed Frau in Young Frankenstein. The eerie housekeeper Blucher kept a secret. He got famous for the part. Everything about her performance was spot on, from her voice to her gaze to the delivery of her lines. Mel, nevertheless, noted that getting there was no picnic. When it came to the character, Cloris had her own ideas. Frau Blucher should have been darker and more serious, in her opinion. Mel envisioned her as quirky and warmly eccentric. That caused a rift between them. Mel, in Cloris' opinion, was lacking something more substantial in his performance. Cloris was being overly analytical, in Mel's opinion. They were often arguing, yet it was never rude or strident. There is one thing Mel would say. No way, Cloris would fight back. The next step would be to go their separate ways. Her version was more effective on occasion. On other occasions, Mel had to almost beg her to give his method a go. According to him, she exhausted him. not by shouting or theatrics, but rather through an abundance of inquiries. With each line came her question, every action, every response. Prior to performing, she had to have a complete grasp of her character. While Mel acknowledged that it slowed things down, he also respected it. He had previously remarked that Cloris elevated every scene to the level of a university argument. Every feeling, every thought, she aspired to investigate. Purpose of a quick look. Mel had a harder time with it, but her acting was stronger because of it. The plot was identical in high anxiety. She brought a creepy, domineering air to the role of Nurse Diesel at the sick hospital. Her performance was outstanding once again. Her disagreement with Mel about direction and tone occurred again. She felt the part called for a more commanding presence and less anarchy. Mel preferred the inverse. He preferred unconventional and rapid things. Focused and taut was what Cloris sought. Each side had valid points, yet they couldn't stop bickering. According to Mel, Cloris gave him the impression that she was not believing him when he said something. Until he caved, she would merely stare at him. On occasion, indeed did. On other occasions, he refused to budge. Whatever the case may be, he assured us, the scenes were fantastic. In spite of everything, Mel persisted in casting her. The message was clear. She could deliver, he was sure. The outcome would be worthwhile, he was sure of it. The amount of work that went into getting there, though, he will never forget. They had a friendly but distant connection off camera. Their chemistry was strong. However, they rarely spent time together. For Mel, it was all about her little bubble. The universe is brimming with profound questions, ideas, and emotions. She had his utmost respect for it. However, he did concede that following a thorough. He wanted a nap after a day of filming with her. Cloris was so dedicated, he said in jest, that she would have performed her part silently if she had thought it would enhance the picture. Neither screen time nor acclaim were important to her. Whatever was true about the character was all that mattered to her. It was both rewarding and draining for Mel to maintain that level of concentration. The Blazing Saddles screenplay was a collaborative effort between Mel and several authors, Richard among them. Chaos reigned in the room. Concepts sprang out in all directions. There was a lot of yelling, arguing, and laughing that made many cry. The film's tone was influenced by Richard's honesty and intensity. He contributed to the creation of frightening and daring scenarios. Mel claimed that Richard was the movie's antagonist. In spite of everything, Mel always had faith in Richard's abilities. He praised him as exceptionally talented. People he had the pleasure of meeting, including authors and comedians. Additionally, he mentioned that Richard existed in an other universe. A cruel and wonderful world filled with brilliant people. There was a period when Richard was fighting his inner struggle. He had a tangled private life. His career was progressing rapidly, but erratically at times. On set, Mel needed someone he could rely on, but he also wanted to lend a hand. Plus, he ultimately decided he couldn't risk it. Mel deeply regretted the fact that Richard was no longer the star. Even though Richard's face disappeared from the film, his voice remained, according to him. Richard was responsible for the humor, the tone, and the courageous storytelling. Mel still regretted not being able to share the screen with him. Friendships were maintained following the film. Mel was never a strong believer. An axe to grind. Richard was too highly esteemed by him. As an artist, he perceived him as someone who did not always conform to the norms of a film set. But he also seen the harm that resulted from that independence. 6. Mel Brooks always remarked that his wife, Anne Bancroft, was the most challenging actor he had ever worked with, and that he loved her more than anyone else. She was more than simply an exceptional actor. She spoke her opinion without fear and had a smart mind. To Be or Not to Be, their collaborative project, was when things truly heated up. Incredibly quickly. Mel and him were wed for more than 4 decades. Deep and everlasting was their love. However, that in no way implies that they were amicable while the cameras were rolling. Actually, collaborating resulted in element of themselves that went unnoticed by the majority. They had a major project together in To Be or Not to Be, and played the starring role, and Mel was both an actor and producer. Revolving around World War II, the picture was an updated version of the original 1942 masterpiece. Comedy, drama, and political topics were all displayed in it. It was an audacious film. The debates were also heated. For Mel, directing and was more challenging than directing anyone else, he revealed afterwards. It wasn't because she was untalented. Compared to other actresses he had encountered, she has far more talent. The issue was that she had an equal relationship with him, rather than treating him as her director, and was very forthright while filming. She let it be known when she didn't approve of a line. In her opinion, if a situation seemed false, she presented her argument. If Mel had planned or written it, it didn't matter to her. She was unafraid to voice her opinions, according to Mel, and would never give him a pass. If she informed him immediately that his direction was confusing. She would arch an eyebrow and inquire, "What kind of emotion?" if he requested for greater intensity in a scenario. After that, she would patiently wait, with her fingers crossed, for him to provide a concrete response. She frightened him at times, he conceded, not for the simple reason that she was cruel, as well as cunning and unpredictable. She was the one actress, he said in jest, who made him doubt himself with each note he composed. They had many arguments while filming. Despite the lack of aggression and noise, their battles were always fierce. One line in particular would Mel's request performance, and then would contend that it failed to capture the essence of the role. More depth would appeal to her, but more vitality would appeal to him. Whenever they got into an argument, the team learnt fast to back off. Still, the scenes came out stunningly well in spite of the stress, and had a grace and power to her performance, which elevated the whole picture. The plot was saved by her impeccable timing, expressive facial movements, and electric chemistry with Mel, and possessed an extraordinary talent for discovering the truth in every phrase, according to Mel. She managed to keep the discussion grounded, even when it was ridiculous. She wasn't being funny. Truthfulness was her game. In many cases, the genuineness of the characters enhanced the comedic moments. Offset, the tension subsided. Their disagreements did not follow them home. According to Mel, they remarried the second they stepped out of the studio. He was going to brew her some tea. His day would be the subject of her inquiries. The moment they returned to the set, though, everything changed. She was someone Mel enjoyed making fun of for her difficulty. He referred to her as the most difficult actress he had ever worked with. He went on to say that she was stunning, exceptionally intelligent, and capable of utterly crushing him with just one statement. He recounted anecdotes of how she would glance at him after reading a line of his work and exclaim. It was not fury. It was merely a shift in perspective. Hackman was a drama major. Mel used to be a comedian. They were both effective. However, they aren't necessarily inseparable. Something, he added, had been taught to him by the event. Not every brilliant actor has a typical profile. Comedy is where some people truly excel. Being precise is necessary for some. And then, there are some, like Hackman, whose intensity transforms the room. Many viewers of Young Frankenstein still find that scene to be magical. It demonstrates that their distinct approaches could potentially collide, although briefly. Great tension can occasionally give rise to hilarious situations, as this illustrates. 4. Mel Brooks held Cloris Leachman in the highest regard. He frequently praised her, as one of the best actors he had ever collaborated with. On screen, she exuded intelligence, competence, and bravery. However, behind the scenes, she was the main source of his headaches. High Anxiety, Young Frankenstein, and History of the World, Part 1 were all projects in which they collaborated. At the same time, she lent a strong presence to the part. Still, she carried disputes with her. Numerous them. Cloris was mentally formidable. It wasn't like she blindly followed orders. As Mel handed her the notes, she did more than simply grin and nod. Why, she wanted to know. He was challenged by her. Various options were proposed by her. On occasion, she would just disobey his orders and proceed according to her own will. Mel went completely bonkers over that. He compared directing Cloris to attempting to control an untamed horse. She was active and focused, but she resented being micromanaged. No matter what other people said, she would remain steadfast in her belief that her way was better. She portrayed Frau in Young Frankenstein. The eerie housekeeper Blucher kept a secret. He got famous for the part. Everything about her performance was spot on, from her voice to her gaze to the delivery of her lines. Mel, nevertheless, noted that getting there was no picnic. When it came to the character, Cloris had her own ideas. Frau Blucher should have been darker and more serious, in her opinion. Mel envisioned her as quirky and warmly eccentric. That caused a rift between them. Mel, in Cloris' opinion, was lacking something more substantial in his performance. Cloris was being overly analytical, in Mel's opinion. They were often arguing, yet it was never rude or strident. There is one thing Mel would say. No way, Cloris would fight back. The next step would be to go their separate ways. Her version was more effective on occasion. On other occasions, Mel had to almost beg her to give his method a go.